at that maybe extra work is need to be done on those 3 or 4 homes at the top. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Because what happens on a slope, the fire, instead of going like this, flames, they go this way. And if your house is here, you'll preheat the house so it ignites easier. That makes sense? Because it preheats. Fuel has to get to 700 to 800 degrees Fahrenheit to ignition point. That's a loose number, very loose number, but it's a good one to talk about. And for these shrubs, grasses, and foliage to burn, what do need to happen first to them? We need to drive off the moisture. Okay? And that moisture is usually driven off by heat. Just think of starting a campfire. Once that moisture is driven off, then it can ignite. And when you're on slope, on a flat ground, most heat goes up, and we get a little heat, radiating heat from you. So that process happens very slowly, the fuel preheats. When it goes like this, or with wind or slope causes my flame go like this, it preheats the fuel, so when the flame gets there, it now may be able to ignite it because it dried it out already, or significantly reduce the fuel moisture. That's from fire. How else are these things losing moisture? Not a trick question, maybe a bad question, but it's not a trick answer.
The lack of moisture this time of year and the evaporation, evapotranspiration.
Just the natural growing of the plants and moisture doing its thing. These plants are putting out flowers. Why do they put out flowers? To reproduce. They reproduce. After they reproduce seed, what do?
Die.
They die and go into dormancy, depending on the plant. No, it's both. We have annuals and perennials. The outcome's the same from a firefighter standpoint, whether they die or go into dormancy. They're dry. Now they become fuel. I don't consider, well, you got 50% of this fuel, 50% is not. The brown stuff's fuel, the green stuff is not fuel yet. In a couple weeks, the story will be different. But they do become fuel. Everything's potential, but when do they become fuel? So that process dictates things. And certain plants going in dormancy at different times. Which do you think goes in dormancy earlier, perennials or annuals?
Perennial.
It depends.
Actually, annuals typically on the broad scale.
I think they got to generate some energy to sleep through the winter.
Annuals go in dormancy earlier because the root systems are small. Shallow, and so all the water is where perennials can survive longer because they can keep growing longer because they have more access to water. Okay, there are anything, by the way, everything I tell you is only 80% true. 20% time Mother Nature is proving me wrong somewhere.
Oh, you sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. There are annuals that will cure out later than my perennials, somewhere. And so that's one of the processes out here is we look at them is, to me, what I've noticed over the years, root deaths. If you really start looking at the plants and start looking at which one cures out first, think of how deep are those roots? The grasses usually cure out first because they got the shallow, so even the perennials. Then my forbs are hit and miss. My small forbs cure out first. My big forbs, like the balsam arrowroot, cures out later. And then my shrubs cure out last. And so it's a progression of when fire season starts. And the more higher percentage of grasses you have, what do you think that means?
Big.
Fire season for you starts earlier.
Like in Arizona.
Yeah. Now the arrowroot, balsam, that's this one right here. Has a very sunflower-like flower. It's very beautiful. Its survival mechanism is to survive as an individual by resprouting, and it doesn't use rhizomes like those other shrubs we talked about. I'm trying to remember this term. All right, there's a fancy term that talks about how a root bulges out. And there's certain plants that do that are very thought after in the ornamental world. They have a big bulge and the plant comes out of it. You guys seen those?
Like an iris.
Yeah, something like that. That mechanism allows it to survive fire better. Plus the deep taproot. And so it doesn't do rhizome, it just resprouts from there. And then after it resprouts, after fire a year or two, it does reseed. Okay. And so it's another, we call it classified more as a sprouter, but the mechanism is different than those shrubs we looked at, how it resprouts and survives. Grasses are similar. The CULM culm of the grass often survives fire. often, but if the fire is any intensity, the grasses can die, or native bunch grasses. Idaho, rough fescue, or the two, and blue bunch wheatgrass would be probably the three primary ones for this area.